Hello and welcome to Get Yourself Optimized. I'm your host, Stephan Spencer, and today it's my distinct pleasure to have Monika Reimann and Stephan Renton with us. For over 3 decades, Monika has trained in conscious breathing, from being a singer in the Children's Radio Choir Berlin to a practitioner of yoga and pranayama, as well as part of an Indonesian martial art called Satria Nusantara. She worked as a professional bodyworker in various countries and is now combining these skills as breathwork facilitator in the highest ranked wellness retreat in Bali, catering to the world's financial elite. Stephan is a business and technology consultant, author, and speaker. His clients have included the United Nations, the World Health Organization, Price Waterhouse, Hewlett Packard, Barclays Capital, and the National Health Service. Stephan received media training from the National Film School in the UK, Vancouver Film School, and the Australian Film, Television, and Radio School. Together, Monika and Stephan are the co-founders of the Peak Flow Academy that teaches high-performance business leaders and entrepreneurs how to use non-ordinary states of consciousness to take their business, health, and personal life to new levels. Monika and Stephan, it's great to have you on the show.
Hi, nice to be here.
Yeah, hi, Stephan.
All right. Well, let's start by if you could share what is conscious breathing and how does it differ from breath work?
Oh, well, conscious breathing is what we do if we are aware of how we breathe and if we can alter it. So, if we breathe normally during the day, we're mostly not conscious of it. It is an automated function in our body, and it is actually the only function that we can have run in the background and that we can also consciously alter. So that gives us access to all the other functions in the body.
Right. But then what is breath work? Is that part of conscious breathing or is that a completely separate modality?
Breathwork is part of conscious breathing. And there are different various ways of how you can do conscious breathing, how you can facilitate breathwork or how it is facilitated. There are various brands, various groups, various ways of how to utilize that the capacity of conscious breathing. And it actually started with pranayama. And pranayama is very distinct from breathwork as it is practiced today. Pranayama is something where you're controlling the breath, where you're really learning the distinct functions of the inhale and the exhale and the pauses. And it is practiced over years, and it really goes into the very fine detail of how energy works. And breathwork, how it is practiced today, or how we are in the West familiar with breathwork, is some way of how to let the breath maximize and then let the breath really breathe you. So it becomes an energy that's available that runs through the body and that brings up anything that hasn't been metabolized yet. And that gives people the opportunity to really heal fast, to realize what is not yet integrated in themselves. And it's a really incredible tool that allows you to do what otherwise would take years to practice.
So pranayama is part of yoga or is it distinct or different from yoga?
Part of yoga, yes.
So,
yeah, pranayama is part of yoga, where yoga normally in the West is referred to the physical practice, but yoga means body, mind, and spirit united, or the union of it. So pranayama is just one branch, is what relates to the breath. Prana is life force, and yama is the learning how to balance that life force or how to direct it.
So how come if you go to a yoga class, let's say it's hot yoga, you don't hear about pranayama, you just do these different yoga poses and get really hot and sweaty. I would think that this is pretty core to yoga and should be part of the yoga classes that are normally instructed here in the West.
Well, somehow it is brought into it. It's just not really consciously brought in. It's not really brought to the awareness of the practitioner enough, in my opinion. But it is used because they use mostly what they call the ujjayi breath, the fire breath.
Right.
So when you're really practicing yoga, you're using the breath. You're using, the postures where you're going inverted, you're exhaling. When you're opening up, you're inhaling. It's in all the yoga. It's included. It's part of it. You do it automatically. but it's also addressed in a good yoga class.
Okay, got it. And where does the Kundalini come in? Like the Kundalini energy, how does that relate to yoga and pranayama and just, perhaps how yoga is taught in the West versus the East?
So Kundalini is really something that has been kept a secret over the years, and it was taught from master to disciple. It is only now in the recent years where in the West we can read anything in a book, and where it is absorbed by the mind. So we're kind of trying to understand it, but it's really something that goes very deeply into energy itself, into how we operate, how we function. So Kundalini energy is believed to be coiled at the base of the spine. So it is like a dormant potential that can rise. So as we rise in awareness, that energy can be brought into awareness to really be translated into whatever we want to facilitate as co-creators. So it can be used in a sexual energy, as sexual energy can be used as creative energy, and it operates on the through duality. So there's the yin and the yang, there is the positive and the negative, and we have the two channels that run through the body that address that. So there's always the inhale and the exhale. So everything is dual. And once that energy starts to rise, that duality fuses, that becomes the one, the potent energy that brings that into union. And then when that rises, that allows us to basically just surpass what what our linear mind can facilitate. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
And I think to put that into perspective, Stephan, what I would mention is that all these modalities we're talking about, your typical yoga classes, your kundalinis, your meditation, all this kind of stuff. Obviously, spending so many years in Santa Monica, I've gone to all these places, and I'm sure we've been to a few of the same together. And yeah, the yoga mostly is more a physical based direction than anything else. But having done a lot of meditation, having done a lot of Kundalini in California, I then did a session with Monika and did this particular style of breathwork. And I had an experience my first time that was like nothing that I'd ever experienced in years of all these other practices before. And that's when I decided, okay, this is something we got to focus on and take it to the world.
Was it a kind of a spiritual experience, an awakening, or was it like a psychedelic trip? Like what was that like, Stephan?
Well, one of the things that is very interesting with this is every experience is different. So I'm almost reticent to say to people what this experience was in case they think, oh, I want to go and do it and have that. And even when people have specific intentions or specific direction, it's a case of they're accessing their subconscious, and your subconscious, which is operating at probably 9 times more capacity than your conscious mind, knows what you need and kind of gives it to you, or that surfaces or manifests during your sessions. But this very first one with Monika, I'd been actually doing a Wim Hof style breath course in Ubud in Bali. And it was interesting, but it wasn't quite what I was looking for. And then I had a friend who is a Green Beret Special Forces soldier from the US, retired now. And he said, oh, you've got to do a session with Monika. She's amazing. What you'll experience with that is like nothing you've ever done before. She saved my life, turned my life around. I'm like, okay, if this is coming from a Green Beret, it's not, some amorphous woo-woo recommendation, from somebody. So I gave that a try and booked Monika. She came, did a private session. And my experience on that very first session, I had about 25 minutes of pretty much, and Monika can probably talk to this more, like an out-of-body experience. It was like a cosmic bliss that I just went into the void, all colors, all love, all light, everything for the 25 minutes. And without being too crass to explain it in terms that most people would explain it or understand it in, would be, and again, that I've traveled and I've done ayahuasca and a lot of these plant ceremonies and medicines and things. It was probably better than any other psychedelic experience ever. And the bliss factor was probably also, would liken it to better than any sex you've ever had in your life. And you're just in this conscious stream of light, utter bliss for 20, 25 minutes. It didn't stop, didn't go away. You're getting downloads. And I can remember Monika saying, okay, Stephen, it's time to come back now. And I'm like, I'm not opening my eyes, I'm staying here. And that was on session 1, as opposed to years of arduous trying this yoga, trying that yoga, doing meditation, doing some Kundalini, running around in white clothing. It's like, okay, that's a fast track. That's what I'm going to do.
So what would be an example of one of the downloads that you received?
Again, just to put it into perspective to some other people, I know a lot of your listeners will be very familiar with the likes of ayahuasca. And I did a very intensive week-long ayahuasca course in Mexico a few years back with some fantastic practitioners. And it's amazing and terrifying, and it kind of tears you down, rips you apart and rebuilds you. And it's, you have almost like a voice that you can get your downloads or your information from. And I would say it was almost similar to that, but much more subtle, much more fine, not threatening, not scary. It's just a very fine, I guess, because you're kind of really just getting in touch with yourself. It's your own subconscious that you're getting in touch with. So nobody knows you better than yourself. So what I found with this is very interesting. There's no guru, there's nothing else that you're supposed to get your inputs from. Your mind and your body, once they're connected, gives you everything you need. So for me, it was very much, to be honest, I guess my first download was, I want to work with this stuff. And if you could teach this to kids, there would never be a drug problem in the world. Nobody would go and take drugs if you could do this naturally. How you could solve a lot of problems if you can get kids to start doing this stuff before they get, in bad neighborhoods, taken onto this kind of thing. And it was just a case of, my God, I was amazed at 55. I think I was 55 at the time, experiencing something as powerful as this out of the blue without warning for the first time. Like I say, I've been around, traveled, tried most things, been adventurous, but this was just like, wow, okay, this is something I've got to figure out how to work with and bring to other people if it's that powerful. And the more that I've worked with Monika and the more we've talked about the results that she has with other people on a weekly basis, my jaw is just
daily.
Daily basis for you. I hear about the updates weekly, but the results that people are having is just, it's astounding. I would never have believed it if I hadn't experienced it for myself.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I've known you for a few years, at least, Stephen, and I take your recommendation seriously. When you, for example, came back from Mexico and you recommended Dennis Naughton to me, ayahuasca expert, to be on this podcast, I had him on, and that was a few years ago now, 3 years ago. Also, Anne-Marie Pizarro, you recommended to me, and I've had amazing Akashic Records sessions with her, and so has Orion, my wife, and I've had her on my podcast as well. So it's great that we can have Monika on to talk about this powerful breathwork type of modality. Now, I'm curious to hear from you, Monika. What sort of downloads have you received through doing this for yourself, right? So you not only put people through your processes, but I'm sure you do this as a form of maintenance and connection to the fabric of creation yourself on a I would imagine daily basis. So what would be some downloads that you've gotten?
So my first experience was really mind-blowing, to say the least. I went into a room full of people and I was really uncomfortable actually with everybody making noises and being around me and, breathing and trying to concentrate on what I'm doing. And at some stage I had to let go because it was too painful to just dwell in what I didn't like about it. And so I went in and somehow I started breathing deeper, and as my breath started to really be more fluid, I basically just turned into just light and the universe, and I could actually understand everything about everything. And it was that feeling of disconnecting, of going out of my body, of really leaving my body and having an experience in spirit or in spirit world, let's say. And then I got back into my body and it felt almost like, oh no, here I am again. And this is exactly that point what I'm working with, which is to really let that experience be in the body or be embodied again. So we're not disconnecting to connect to spirit, but we're embodying spirit. So this is really what my work is about, is that disconnect disappears after a while. You know, we don't have big experiences and then we kind of come back and go, ugh, and then we seek that experience again outside of ourselves, but it becomes part of what we live. And that to me is the value of what I really want to bring to people, is that remembering that actually we are that which we seek, and to really rediscover that within ourselves.
Yeah, very important. I learned this lesson last year. I was flying in the clouds. I was so blissed out and ecstatic over my connection with Source, with the Creator, and I lost track of the physical world, the overseeing my staff and paying the bills and all that sort of stuff kind of fell by the wayside, and uh, the business went through a rough patch because I was not grounded. I wasn't really showing up in a peak state. I was, uh, up in the clouds. So very important to draw the energy from the higher realms, higher dimensions, and ground into this dimension and bring that, draw down that energy and manifest that in your daily life. Very important.
Exactly, because this is what we need here. This is really what people need to be reminded of as well. It's not like there is not this heaven out there. It is all the one experience, and then we can really learn how to bring that back, or how to really have that availability of the access to that at any time, and how to, once we start to really express it, our life becomes that flow. Rather than seeking the flow experience, we become the flow, and the flow takes us. And it's just like my life has been that flow on many levels. And, I really feel it when I'm out of it because things just happen, they align, they synchronize. It just becomes this incredible experience of, wow, I didn't know that was possible, rather than, oh, what's the next thing I need to do now to get where I want to be. That's the difference. Yeah.
Right. So when you're doing this new type of modality, or this different type of modality than the kind of usual modalities that people might experience, and it shows up for you in a way that you're able to manifest that in daily life and not kind of end up in the clouds floating about, do you stop having the out of body experiences, the astral projection, or do those still happen for you and it's just maybe less often? I don't know. Like, how does that affect your ability to go out of body?
It becomes to weave in and out. So I get much more adaptable in the way that I can come in and out of the states, and I can raise my kind of sort of ability to be in states of expanded consciousness, and bring in what is needed, sort of remember my intention and then express that out. So that becomes easier. Before it was more like, these waves, like, ooh, body and then spirit and body spirit, and now it becomes more of a interwoven experience. So obviously through being a breath worker, when I'm teaching, or when I'm facilitating a session, I need to be able to get into that frequency with the client, and I need to be able to facilitate what they're going through and sort of navigate that space with them. And so yeah, there's just a lot of flow. There's a lot of like um, it's very difficult to explain or put into words, but it is through the body that I'm accessing it now. And it changes because it becomes available rather than being something out there and then I can't make sense of it. So, like, I did a lot of ayahuasca before too. I had very incredible experiences. And that taught me in that moment such a vast amount of information that to integrate it was very difficult. It was sort of like, well, what am I supposed to do with this now? And the way that breathwork works for me is that when I'm not well, or when I need to understand something, or I don't know what to do, then if I breathe, I get the message, I understand, or I at least have a clue how to proceed. And so it becomes more of, in each moment I receive what's needed in that moment, and not this vast amount that I then don't know what to do with. Yeah.
Now, with Wim Hof method, one of the many benefits that's touted is it boosts your immune system. And indeed, some of the studies that were done on Wim, because of his really strong immune system, they were able to, for example, inject really harmful bacteria. I forget which ones, but just right into his bloodstream directly, and he fought it off. He had maybe a little bit of a fever for a short while, but then he killed off all the really dangerous bacteria that was injected directly into his bloodstream. So, does the modality that you work with, is that also an immune boosting type of modality?
Definitely. I mean, the thing with Wim Hof is that he actually taught students, and they got the same thing done. They also got the viruses or whatever it was injected, and they could do exactly the same things. And it was to show that it wasn't that he had superpowers. It was just really something that people can learn, that something can facilitate for themselves and be taught. So yeah, this what I'm doing. We did an experiment like a week ago where we were testing the brainwave function during breathwork, before and during, and what it does to the system, like the intelligence of the system, of how it raises the bar on. I don't know. Maybe you talk about it. The terms
sure.
better.
As part of a new project we're working on, we brought in a kind of choose my words carefully, a Russian scientist, and he hooked Monika up to a heart rate variability monitor and an electromagnetic measuring device, and we measured all her stats before she started breathwork, and also during and at the end of the breathwork session, and the results were pretty amazing. I mean, some of the readings on this were perhaps a little on the woo-woo side, so we kind of discarded those ones. But it was looking at the brainwave functions, it was looking at the energy in the body, the psychological state, and it basically had doubled all of the levels within, I think it was an hour and 5 minutes. You could see, I've actually sent one over to you, so if you want to include that at all in the video at any point, you can add that in, but it was showing, what brainwaves was it? Was it delta?
Delta was down and alpha was up double. So
yeah, the brainwaves delta was 50% reduction after the breath work, and then alpha brainwaves were double. It was looking at the energy levels of the body, the energy going out and the energy coming in, which again switched from being depleted to actually charging the body by the end of that, and also at the psycho-emotional state. You can see the kind of the brainwaves and the colors, and it went from a little bit, I mean, scatter is the wrong word, but active, a little bit, I guess, excited about being measured and hooked up to all these machines. And then at the end, it was just like completely calm, blue, and tranquil. It's like, wow, okay. And that was within an hour and 5 minutes. So it was pretty incredible to see actually scientifically measured results rather than just somebody talking about it or going, oh yes, I feel like that. So that was very interesting.
Yeah. We'll include the before and after brain map in the show notes for this episode. Yeah, it was very interesting. I did see that before the interview. Now, the benefits of being in an alpha brainwave state. So that is also connected up with being in flow or flow state. So you can accomplish a massive amount of productive work in a short period of time, maybe a day's work, or let's say a week's worth of work could be done in less than a day if you maintain that alpha brainwave state and crank through your deep work projects. Is this something that you find your clients and students are benefiting from? Are they doing a lot of deep work because of this?
Yes, absolutely. I had, for example, in one group, breathwork, I had one client, he works with some big foundation. I don't really want to name things too much because it's confidential when they come to me. But he was creating a course where he teaches people, and he's a public speaker, and he teaches about mind and how to use your mind in a much better way. And he jumped, like, I was asking the group, so like, is there anything you want to share? And he was like, I gotta rewrite my course. I got the whole download. I have to leave. I have to write it all down now. So sometimes we can really get to that alpha state, and when we have the intention and we're able to really write those waves, and we allow ourselves to really receive the messages and to really listen in. So it's not like we need to really learn so much. We need to just be able to be with what is wanting to be received. It sounds so simple, and it actually is, but it's not that easy for us because we're so busy in our minds and we think we have to do so much. But sometimes it's just about being still and quiet and listening. And yeah, so alpha state is something we get into every day, but it is when we're sleeping. So the beauty about breathwork is that we create so much energy that we can be in such a heightened, energized state. And then when we can relax into it, this is when we access those states, and that's when we receive that creative flow. Yeah.
So how does that differ from theta and from gamma? My understanding of gamma is it is pretty rare that you're in a gamma brainwave state, and when you are, you might have a spiritual kind of experience, awakening experience. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah. So theta is where we go more into the healing frequencies. This is more of a healing reset. And I didn't measure it, but I'm pretty sure that I know the distinction within myself when I'm breathing, which one I'm at. And gamma, I think I've had once. Once again, I can't prove it, but this is where what I would call the 0 point, where everything just started to level. Like my breathing became less and less, distinct as an inhale and exhale until it kind of almost flatlined. But I was still breathing, but it wasn't physically there. It was almost so slow, but I could feel that pulsing slow down so intensely. It almost like it leveled, but it was still there. It was still, I don't know how to say it, but I sort of dropped into the center of that, and that was just like the most unbelievable bliss. It was nothing and everything at the same time. So yeah, I would call that the gamma.
Gotcha.
I think one of the things as well that's quite interesting that Monika works with is trauma release also. If people are going to get into an optimal state, a lot of the time the body is holding on to past experiences which don't necessarily have to be some huge, horrendous, trauma incident that leaves them scarred for life. There can be lots of little emotional traumas that build over time. And with the work Monika is doing, it actually allows the body and allows people to release these blockages, these energy blockages in the body without even being conscious or thinking about it or talking about it for 6 months. It almost goes into spontaneous release. And then when these blockages, these energy blockages and these things that are stored in the body release, that allows you to go into this flow state a lot easier. And again, a lot of people, my Green Beret friend, for example, he had obviously quite a lot of stuff to release from all the war and the death and the, this and that. So he does that. I've also had that as well. Again, that very first time I did this, usually I'll go to these sessions and somebody say, oh, come on, make a noise, growl, do this. And I'm like, okay, whatever. I'm not one of the woo-woo people that will just jump into anything. And then the very first session with Monika, I'm sitting there and she'll actually, because she's got years and years of bodywork experience and energy work experience, she'll just come around and slightly adjust the way you're sitting or your neck or lift your legs into different position. And then all of a sudden I was like, what the hell is that growling noise? And I was like, oh, it's me. And I'm sitting there like growling like a wolf without even being aware of it. And then, you go into these states where your body will shake or something will tremor and then something is released. I mean, another time I had some problems sleeping due to some childhood instances and a fear of death. So we decided to work on that in a session. And it actually took 2 sessions to get through it completely. But I ended up in this void, this almost in a cave under the ground kind of experience, in this complete and utter black void. There was nothing, there was no noise, there was no sensation. And for somebody with a fear of death and dying ingrained from a childhood, that could be traumatic. But for me, I was just sitting there in this absolute nothing, completely relaxed, and became very comfortable with it. So it's very interesting the way that this modality integrates what you need, releases things you don't need, and then it starts aligning things that you are in a much better facility to get into that flow state. And that's actually what we're working on together now, is a course specifically for entrepreneurs and business people that address the big areas in your life. And then Monika will, over a 6-week period, lead them through these experiential sessions, releasing what they don't need, getting downloads and aligning better to be into this flow state for better productivity in the work life, in their health, and the lives at home. So that's something very exciting that we're working on right now.
That's great. What's the course called?
It's going to be called Peak Flow.
Peak Flow. And how is peak flow different from a flow state? I mean, the concept of being in peak flow.
Yes. You want to answer that one?
No, you go.
Okay, sure. Peak flow is just, I guess, what we're describing the course, the name that we kind of came up with to embody what we're taking people towards. So the goal of this is through this 6-week period to introduce people to the modalities, the sessions, as Monika was touching on earlier, how to get into this state and not just lose yourself in the kind of bliss and then come back with nothing. Is to actually, have an intention, set the intention so that when you're in this state, there is something working. And even if you don't remember it, your body and your subconscious has got it. And you're going to be working and coming back. And then week by week, she's building and showing people how to get into that flow state, how to raise the bar, how to recognize it if you come out of it, how to get back in again. And you're weaving it all together. So by the end of this period, you'll have addressed the bigger areas of your life and be much more aware of how to navigate yourself in and out of that flow state.
Awesome. Sounds like a really great course. And I'm curious to hear what happened with your fear of death. You did 2 sessions with Monika to address that. Is that completely obliterated, or are you just mostly not fearful of death now? Like, where are you at?
I would say it was probably combined. I had an uncle who died when I was fairly young, and the family's reaction to that at the time wasn't so great. So as a child, nothing was really explained to me well. So I had a lot of sleeping issues, fear of going into a deep sleep, that I wasn't going to come out again. I used to have a fear of getting grabbed or dragged by something if I went into really deep sleep. And, just logically working things out, it was kind of tied into that experience and a couple of other things. So we did a session to address this. And the first session, we kind of got into it, but for a few nights afterwards, it almost rekindled that experience. I came out of it with quite an adrenaline kick. And that's when something hasn't quite been integrated or dealt with yet. So then the second session, which I referred to earlier, when it was almost a guided session where Monika was taking me into a cave under a tree under the ground, and I was supposed to go and visualize other stuff. It veered off in a different direction and just took me into this null, void, nothing state. And then after that time of just sitting there in absolute nothing, going, this is pretty good. There's nothing there's nothing distracting me. There's no noise. There's nothing to do. It's just complete and utter relaxation. So I would say, yeah, definitely. I've actually recently just lost my father, and
I'm so
I
sorry.
think that's definitely one of the things that has been helping me deal with that is doing some of these modalities, becoming absolutely certain of things on the other side. And it's definitely been interesting. So I'd say yes, it's definitely addressed my fear of death and shifted the whole perception of that.
Yeah, I speak to that too because it's a very interesting subject, because we think that healing means it suddenly disappears. You know, it's like, poof, now we're healed and we have no more issues. But it's really a journey, and it can go deeper and deeper and deeper and wider and more interesting. So we sort of move through levels of understanding of, you know, with whatever condition we're looking at. So there's always within the duality, if then we have somehow this disconnect through a trauma, we understand that the first stage is we understand, oh, there is a duality and actually it's okay, rather than, oh no, there's only one side and the other needs to be shunned. And then somehow that becomes our wisdom. So it's almost like it becomes our teaching to the world when we start to really integrate those aspects that we then, you know, began to sort of bring back in, or it's almost like fragmented selves that we then reintegrate into ourselves, and that become then the picture that makes us different than others in a good way. So yeah, we don't become the yes no, but we become the yes everything, but I choose this. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you know what made me think about well, when you were talking, both of you, about this void and also the duality, I was thinking it's kind of like you have an opinion and you think that that's the only right opinion and everything else is wrong. So it's like, that's it, my way or the highway. You don't even see the duality, that there's, you know, contrast and two different positions and so forth. You only see your own position. But then if you start seeing the duality or the contrast, you can appreciate the light because you see the darkness. You can appreciate the sun because you experience the rain. And without one, you can't really truly appreciate the other. But then when you get into that void that Stephan experienced, become nobody, no thing, no time, no place, right? Nowhere, then you become part of the quantum field. You become part of the one, the all. Reminds me of Ram Dass, also reminds me of Dr. Joe Dispenza. So I wanted to hear what your thoughts were on Ram Dass and Joe Dispenza. Any experiences or thoughts around their teachings, or have you studied under them or anything?
Me? No, I haven't studied under them. I have listened to Ramdas. I've listened to Joe Dispenza. I think they're awesome. They both speak from a different perspective, but come to the same conclusions, like everybody else that sort of explores consciousness on a deeper level. They all have their take on it, they all have their access to it, but in the end, yeah, it's the same field that they access, it's the same realizations, the same wisdom that they draw from it. And one is more from scientific background and one more from experiential background, I would say.
Yeah, there's
Ram Dass,
the superconscious, right? There's the what Carl Jung studied and wrote about and made a core focus, was understanding how we can tap into superconsciousness. So, what are your thoughts about?
In breathwork, I would say first we breathe, we have the inhale and the exhale, and then we're conscious of it. Then we tap into our unconscious, which to me is the expression of the body, is the expression of the unconscious. So once we tap into this, we become aware of our body. The breath fuses with with the bodily expressions, and basically when we then fuse the inhale and the exhale together, it becomes one circular breath. So there's no more break, there's no more this and that. Then we have that access to the superconscious. So to me, it's like that fusion of the duality becomes the access to the superconscious. That's how I see it.
Awesome. And I'm curious to hear some examples of dealing with anxiety or paranoia or debilitating mental illnesses, and how this kind of modality would potentially impact that.
Yeah, so I work in this retreat where there are a lot of clients that suffer from severe conditions of the mind that are polarized. So there's a lot of people with depression, with like really severe cases of anxiety, and sure, one breath work brings them into a flow, into a feeling great, into this reconnect of wow, I'm okay and I can feel happy. Yet then they fall back, and there's this revisit of oh no, now I'm not okay anymore, and oh no, nothing helps. So it's really learning to also understand that life is an experience within duality, and there are all these states that we experience, and to really learn to relax with it, so it's not just like one modality can heal all, one modality can do all. It is learning to also take that modality and then bring it really into life on a conscious level, like breathing. It's not like, oh, I go to breathwork, I'll be healed. It's like, I go to breathwork, I'll be healed. And then I can apply what I've learned in breathwork and bring that to life. So whenever I feel in distress, whenever I feel anxious, all I need to take is one breath and just let that exhale go, and boom, anxiety is gone. But people mostly don't remember it then. So it's really having a practice, having an ability to stay in a pretty stable way enough that we can remember. So really, extreme states take that regulation first before they can really go into expansion. So yeah, it's very individual. It's very relative to the circumstances, but it's a practice that can help through any circumstance. So any anxiety attack can be healed immediately. Like when I wasn't even a facilitator yet, I was in a breathwork session of another facilitator, and I was assisting, and there was a guy having an asthma attack. And I didn't know that was an asthma attack. I had no clue. I just saw him suffering, and I just went over, and he could not breathe. He was suffocating, and he didn't have his inhaler, whatever you call it, his breathing device. And so I was sitting in front of him, and basically he could not let the breath go. He was trying to breathe in, but he was already breathed in, and he could just not go. And I just looked into his eyes and said, "Breathe with me. Just do what I do." And he went like, I can't. I'm like, yes, you can. And I just took one breath with him, and he started laughing. He was out of it. So it's just one breath. Just remember it, and just take it, and boom, it resets immediately. It's that powerful.
Yeah. Take it one step at a time, one breath at a time, instead of trying to solve all of your problems and the world's problems all at once. Yeah.
That's right. There you go. Yes.
So how about PTSD? How does that differ from other maladies or issues that, is that something that can be also addressed? I'm sure it can be. So maybe you could share an example, anonymize it, of course, if you could, just give us a
So
window into
PTSD
this.
obviously. PTSD obviously relates to trauma. So this is really when there is in the body, there's a reactivity that's highly triggered, and that keeps running its course. So when you tap into, it's almost like something triggers it, and then you tap into this whole cycle of events. So all the chemistry starts to blow up, all these reactions start to, kind of explode in the body. and it's very difficult to find a way out of it once you're in it. So and then what happens is the mind perpetuates it. So it starts to go into story. It tells itself the story about what is happening, and it just deepens and worsens. So the way out of it is really to clear that intensity, to clear the charge. And that is really simple with breath work. You're just allowed to clear the charge without having to go into the story, without having to remember any of it, without having to understand any of it. You just allow this nervous system to basically release all the dysfunctional connections and allow it to heal and just basically reset. Yeah.
And Stephan, have you experienced any PTSD? And if so, was that something that you managed to shed through the work with Monika?
I'm not sure if I would call it PTSD, but a lot of my friends from back in the States now, when I'm talking to them or they see me, they'll go, who the hell zen you out? Because they seem to think that I'm a lot more calm and a lot more peaceful than I was in the States when I was having some traumatic stuff going on. But a better example would have been my friend I mentioned earlier, who is a Green Beret, who recommended me go see Monika. And he actually gave us a really good summary of the work that he'd been doing and how it really calmed him down. It released his anger issues, allowed him to be able to breathe and not react quickly as he would when he was triggered, by some of his experiences of the past. And his I think his quote was, "Yeah, she saved my life." Mm-hmm. So that when I hear things like that from somebody like a Green Beret with multiple years of combat experience, I'm like, okay, there's definitely something to experience and check into here.
Yeah.
There's also this beautiful. It's beautiful to see, because he comes often to breath work, to see how the body becomes more resilient and becomes much more easily adaptable, and how first the trauma release is kind of painful, like it's kind of like something the body is fighting itself, not knowing what to do, and now it becomes much more fluid, much more easy. It's not so dramatic. It's sort of like, oh, okay, now it released. Now I feel much better. Now I can breathe deeper. And so, yeah, that's the beauty. Like the body really, this intelligence of the body is so incredible that it can just learn so easily to facilitate itself, to self-regulate, to self-heal much easier.
Yeah. Are you guys familiar with the book, The Body Keeps the Score?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that? I have not read it, but I've heard good things about it.
Yeah, I can't spell the name. It's a Dutch guy that wrote the book. Yes, it's about trauma release. So cellular memory, you were asking before, it really addresses that. It's how experiences stay in the cells of the body, how there are many books about this, and I read many about them. I read many books about trauma release and about trauma and how it embeds. But it's so complex, it's so incredible. You can look at it on so many levels, because we have the brain cells, we have the nervous system, we have the actual flesh, we have the connective tissue. All these are cells. So this is almost like this intelligent system that has systems within the systems that have their own way of storing information, and that then communicate with each other in order to facilitate all of that information. And the brain, obviously, it's like this, the central station that then, allows the information to be distributed. So, yeah, I see it more like when something is blocked, the system becomes sort of self-sufficient, but obviously it's not sufficient because it's not connected to the rest. It's like us, when we're trying to self-isolate, it becomes dysfunctional because everything else starts to break down around us, and the communication and everything just starts to go off. And when the system is in flow and everything is connected, it sort of makes a lot more sense, and it's much easier to regulate. So trauma release, or the release of that cellular memory, is, I can go into microbiology and the ligands and, how it all, chemistry, how it connects and how it locks in through little slots that only go for one emotion into a certain organ, but I won't go there because it's going too far. But it's really to allow the system to self-regulate by actually breathing. You don't need to know all of that. What you do is you just breathe and you allow, and you see what the body comes up with. And what comes up is what hasn't been integrated, what wants to heal. So whatever arises from the depth of our system is somehow a memory that has been stored in the cells. And it's not just a memory in the brain. Actually, the brain doesn't hold that much memory. It's in the body itself, in the body. So if there's an injury, the body holds that memory until it's healed. And even scar tissue, distorts memory on some level where things cannot flow that easily anymore. So it's memory and cellular memory is a very, very complex theme. And it can be super interesting to dive into it, but I find we can get lost in information, and it's so much easier to come back to that simplicity, which I love, is this just inhale and exhale and watch and allow and see where you get triggered. And this is exactly what you need to just neutralize and allow to come back into harmony.
Do you think there is a spiritual root to every physical ailment or malady?
That's a trap question. I think there's a connection between physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual, yes. And we can look at it as sort of layers of ways of how we can experience it. And yes, definitely yes. But our understanding of it is slightly limited, and our way of being able to express it through words is very trappy, so I won't go there.
All right. So I know we're out of time. I just wanted to, again, for our listener or viewer who's interested in taking your course or working one-on-one with you guys, what is the best website address for them to go to, and how do they follow you on social and all that?
Sure. The easiest thing right now, because as I mentioned, we're launching the pilot program this month. So the easiest thing for them to do is just go to peakflow.life, and that's going to redirect them to me on social media, and we can just have a chat and see if things are a fit, what they would like help for or help with, and if it's going to be something relevant that's going to be included and covered in the course. And we can just have a chat and see if it's something that we can potentially help with, and just take it from there.
All right. Sounds great. Well, thank you, Monika and Stephan. This was inspiring, and I think that you're doing God's work in the world. So keep it up.
Thank you so much. Also, thank you for what you're doing. Definitely found its expression through you. Yeah, thank you.
Great. Thanks very much, Stephan.
So now, reveal some light in the world, and we'll catch you on the next week's episode. I'm Stephan Spencer, your host, signing off.